So we're going to bring this first important inquiry of the day to a close by welcoming Lord Nigel Lawson on stage. He is the former Chancellor of the Exchequer in the Maggie Thatcher government. That's no mean feat, and is arguably the most successful finance minister in the recent history of the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for coming here all the way from London.
Could you have a glass of water, please? Could you give me a glass of water, please? Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be in Canada again. Conrad Black assured us that Canada was a great nation, and everything Conrad says is right. And I'm delighted to second his motion. This is, however, my first time at the court of King Moses. A very curious but stimulating experience. We've just had two outstanding presentations in my mind, which to anybody who a fair-minded person, I think have made a completely compelling case that the conventional wisdom at the present time, the political correctness at the present time on this issue, and political correctness is a blight. It's the curse of this age. It prevents proper debate. It prevents the truth from getting out. Anyhow, you've had two absolutely compelling and politically incorrect presentations. I'm not sure that I can add a great deal to that, but I will tell you a little bit about where I came from on this issue, and then towards the end, I will say a few things about the latest papal encyclical, which Moses, with his customary cleverness, arranged to have published the day before this event. I have never been one who liked living in the past. I've always lived in the present and interested in the future. So when I left government in 1989 and wrote my memoirs, that was to draw a line under the past. But I discovered there was one issue which had not crossed my desk at all as a minister. It didn't exist in those days. In the 1980s, it was a big issue. And that was the issue of global warming. And I thought I'd better find out a little bit about it. This is something new. I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't want to go on talking about the same old things I'd always been talking about. And the first thing that I discovered was that no proper economic analysis had been done of the cost effectiveness of the decarbonization program which the politicians were talking about. That shocked me. When I was Chancellor of the Exchequer, I would not have allowed by the government of which I was a member to do anything, say anything, and then any commitments about decarbonization or anything else for that matter, but decarbonization, without there having been a thorough economic analysis. Because very often, if you don't have a proper economic analysis, what you do might actually do more harm in terms of its costliness than what you are trying to prevent. So at that time, I just been appointed a member of the Economic Affairs Committee of the House of Lords. So I said to my colleagues on the committee, why don't we do a study of the economics of climate change? And I knew nothing about the issue at the time, but it was an extremely educative process. We had all the top people come and give evidence to us. And not only did we discover, and we produced at the end of the day a unanimous report. We had peers from all the different political parties signed up to a unanimous report which was extremely skeptical about the economics of climate change, or decarbonization rather, the economics of decarbonization. But what is more, I learned then that the science, and Patrick Moore has spoken brilliantly on the science today, but the science was extremely uncertain. It is perfectly true that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and there is a greenhouse effect, that is to say that the concentration of carbon dioxide emissions in the atmosphere makes the planet warmer than it would otherwise be. But what is extremely uncertain is, first, how much warmer. Secondly, this applies only if other things are equal, and we know that other things are not equal. And one of the problems with climate science, we know things, for example, has already been mentioned. 1,000 years ago, the world had the medieval warm period, which is an extremely warm period, and it was also an extremely beneficial period. During the Baroque period, they had very good music, but very bad for farming because we were in the Little Ice Age. And temperatures plummeted, and nobody knows why, and that was a very harsh and difficult time. Nobody knows about really much. I don't blame the climate scientists for that, not knowing. It's extremely complex. The natural forces, both solar and the oceans, the behavior of the oceans, extremely difficult to work out how that works, how that affects the climate. Nobody knows. But what I do blame them for is pretending that they know when they don't know, or rather pretending because they don't know, this can be disregarded. And so it is likely, in fact, they thought that the carbon dioxide concentrations would raise the temperature enormously, and the computer models, which have substituted for proper scientific evidence nowadays, the computer models projected that if carbon dioxide concentrations and emissions rose faster, which they have done, thanks largely to the remarkable growth of China, that the temperature, the rise we'd seen in the last quarter of the 20th century, a rise over that last quarter, recorded rise of about 0.5 degree Celsius, would accelerate. What has happened? The carbon dioxide has gone up faster, the temperature has stopped rising altogether. And the apologists for the conventional wisdom have alternated between two different explanations. And it's rather like the prisoner in the dock who's accused of murder. And he says, in the first place, I wasn't there at the time. In the second place, even if I was there, it was an accident. If he presents both these, then you know probably that neither of these things is true. And what they said, first of all, the hiatus, as it's called, doesn't really exist, even though the British Met Office and all the other comparable offices have shown that the temperature is flatlined. And then they secondly say, well, the missing heat has in fact gone into the deep, deep oceans, where nobody, of course, can measure it. And anyhow, the deep, deep oceans are incredibly cold, so it really doesn't matter very much. So they don't know why their theories haven't worked out, but they haven't worked out. The other thing is, even if there is a slight warming effect from carbon dioxide, does it matter? Well, it doesn't. It clearly is good for the planet in the sense that has already been pointed out by both Patrick and Alex. The fertilization effect, that is really well known. One of the things that I did two things when I got, after the Economic Affairs Committee report. I decided that I must write a book about it, but I couldn't get a publisher. It was so politically incorrect that no British publisher would touch it. And the only reason I got it published at all was because my daughter, who's a very successful author, had an agent. And she asked her agent to find a publisher for my book, and he was so scared that she'd never speak to him again if he didn't find a publisher. He managed to find a small American publisher, which had an even smaller British offshoot, which it had rescued from the liquidator. They published the book, and it became a bestseller. I called it an appeal to reason, a cool look at global warming, because reason was sadly missing. And I think it is particularly culpable that scientists should betray science in the way they have done by going from reason to what is in effect a quasi-religion. The book, which I'm glad to say is still in print, and I hope you will read it. It has the huge merit of being very short. And it became a huge success. And people said to me, Nigel, you must write another book. And I couldn't see really the point in writing another book. So I decided, because I'd said really most of what needed to be said, I thought I'd start a think tank. So I founded a think tank, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which is a registered educational charity, and it now has a campaigning offshoot, the Global Warming Policy Forum. You can look at our website, thegwpf.com. It's well worth looking at. I have a brilliant director who runs it. And one of the things we did, in order to make it quite clear that we were completely honest, completely kosher, we said right at the beginning, our very first board meeting, we will not accept a penny of funds from the energy industry or anyone with a significant interest in the energy industry. But of course, a lot of our donors choose to remain anonymous. And they choose to remain anonymous for a very good reason. You are vilified if you come out as a climate dissenter. I have never known anything in my life. When I was Chancellor in Margaret Thatcher's government, we were pursuing extremely controversial economic policies. And I was used to being attacked all the time. Didn't worry me in the slightest, but I was used to being attacked. But I never had anything remotely like what you get here with this issue. The vilification is quite remarkable. And attempt to suppress and a refusal to debate. And I came across, when I was writing this book, a large number, they may not have been a majority, but a very significant number of young climate scientists who had considerable doubts about the conventional wisdom. But they daren't speak out, because if they did speak out, that would be the end of their funding. They would never get any research grants of any kind if they spoke out about it. And same my political friends in the House of Commons, I still have a lot of connections there. There are a lot who are dissenters there. But they know that if they speak out, they will never get promotion. And that is what it is like. And because I'm a very old man, I'm now well into my 80s, I've got no career left. My career's all behind me. I thought I should speak out because I've got nothing to lose. But the climate of fear, to use an expression which is well known to you, is among the youngsters, is really quite appalling. Anyhow, I produced this book, which is a bestseller. I started the think tank, which is doing very well, and I said we won't take funding from the fossil fuel industries. But they said, oh, well, if you're not revealing your donors, and the reason our donors remain most, and if they want to declare themselves, that's great, but most of them remain anonymous because they don't want the vilification which would come. They would be vilified if publicly, and they're not used to that kind of thing. So they don't. But nevertheless, I have on my board, among others, former Private Secretary of the Queen, the former head of the British Civil Service, and a Bishop of the Church of England. So what these people are actually saying, and this seems to me a good test of paranoia, that all of us are engaged in a conspiracy to lie. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer, the former head of the British Civil Service, the Bishop of Chester, as he is, and the former Private Secretary of the Queen. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. So we are now faced with the fact that there is no warming to speak of coming along. There might be. Is it going to do any harm? Well, even the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has conceded that for the rest of this century it'll do more good than harm. This is quite clear in many fields. Human health, for example. There are many, many more deaths in the world from cold-related problems than from heat-related problems. This is established. And in general, the warming that's like, according to the IPCC, which I think exaggerates the so-called climate sensitivity, that is the extent to which the temperature of the planet warms as a result of increased carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. But even on their rather exaggerated expectations, they say it'll be actually beneficial to mankind for the rest of this century. But even if there are problems, what do? If there are problems, you adapt to them. And that's what mankind has always done throughout the ages and throughout the world. The temperature varies enormously in different parts of the world, as you all know. I mean, take two very successful countries which have a mean annual temperature about 27 degrees Celsius apart. Finland, which is very poor, very cold, very successful country, very cold, and Singapore, which is very hot. And yet people manage. And not only is adaptation sensible, but warming will bring benefits and it'll bring disadvantages. And if you pocket the benefits, but use the resources of modern technology to reduce the disadvantages, then that is clearly the only sensible policy, and decarbonization is for the birds. Finally, the papal encyclical. The papal encyclical is, and it seems sadly, an attempt by the Roman Catholic Church to jump onto this Church of climate change. It is the most reactionary document I have ever read. Because it's reactionary because it is fundamentally against progress. The Pope, he has good intentions, I'm sure, but we all know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He says he's concerned about the poor. The thing that the poor need is cheap energy, cheap and reliable energy. And for the present time and for the foreseeable future, that can come only from carbon-based energy. Let's have all the research done. Do plenty of research, see whether you come up with something else. Maybe one day you will, one day you probably will. But for the foreseeable future, the only way of improving the lot of the poor is by cheap and reliable energy, which means fossil fuel energy. And the logic of the logic, if you call it, of the Pope's thing finally, is that the Industrial Revolution should never have happened. We should still be living in the poverty and squalor that existed for all except the rich before the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is a big mistake, and China's growth, which has lifted so many people in China out of poverty, which is based entirely on a coal-fired electricity generation program, that should never have happened. This is madness, but it's not merely madness, it is also wicked. Thank you.